Jim, we're going to change gears a little bit now and talk about your daily life. When you were over in Iraq, how did you stay in touch with your family?
They had email that worked for the most part. And
you had access to a computer every day?
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, sometimes the internet was up, it was down, and different things. It was hard to get on the phones sometimes. They actually had a small phone center that you could go and at different times, and you might have to wait in line. But you would have an opportunity to call, like on the satellite phone here and there. They had a computer center that you could go to, and but sometimes if it got too hot, the computers didn't work too well either. But I think they tried to get the facilities the best they could. They would try to air condition the area and where the computers were.
What was the food like? Where did you eat?
They have well, we insisted on calling it the galley, but in the Army terms they called it the DFAC, and they had contractors who would come in, and every once in a while, like if convoys couldn't get fresh food in, they'd have to stretch the food they had as far as they could if it wasn't safe. But for the most part, I thought the food was they tried really hard to give us the best accommodations they could.
So you had 3 meals a day in a dining facility?
Yeah. It was different. With the convoy teams, I would just pack. Thank goodness for cargo pockets, because you could put like 6 meals in there. But if you were on the base, you could go. You'd have 3 meals a day, and I think they had a midnight meal too. But I generally wasn't there for that.
And then when you go out on convoy duty, you would just pack as much food as you could in your cargo pockets? Did you have enough of other supplies that you needed, enough of the medical supplies that you needed, clothing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, we were in pretty good shape, I think, as far as supplies. They would have. They had one area that was for mail. And you could go there, and people, you could get packages from your family, and you could get mail and things like that. And one of the nice things I experienced while I was there is some people would get more mail than others, and they would try to find ways. If someone sent something generally to someone, they would put it in a box. Maybe if a person hadn't received mail for a while, that was sort of heartwarming to me. Because they, getting mail was, that was, you would just wait for the mail to come in.
Was the mail pretty regularly distributed?
I think it was, and it would come into the mail center, and sometimes you would get it over to the area that was called our headquarters, and that was it. I just think that there were a lot of people that I would talk to. I know when I left, I would talk with some of the people, and then the conversations you can have, like things can just get so, everything is so magnified, I think, when you're deployed. If you have like a loneliness or a fear or something like that, it's magnified by a bunch there. And I was talking with a bunch of guys, and it's not conversations I would have like if I'm just hanging around here. It's the conversations had a whole different tone. I mean, we would talk about our families, and we'd have emotional discussions about things. We would have some guys would say prayers, or some guys would come in and say, "Hey, I found out my son is sick," or my wife. One of them, his wife was having a difficult pregnancy, and you would find people coming to each other, and we would look after each other that way. But some of the guys would just say, I'm just afraid that as soon as I got on that plane and I landed, as soon as I got on that plane, I feel like everyone's just going to completely forget. And I feel like it's, that outside of a couple people that I'm just trying to survive to go back. I just want to get back. And there was a real sense of people deferring whatever was going on for that year including me. I thought to myself, as soon as I have both feet back in the United States again, this is all gone. I've learned to compartmentalize things. I thought I've been around for a while. I've experienced some different things, and I thought as soon as I get back, this is all over. That's it. And so I look forward to it. And some of the discussions we had, like before we left, I was telling someone that I was apprehensive about coming back. And the reason I said that is there was one guy who wanted to extend there. He said, well, we're almost done, a couple months we're going to be done with this tour. I want to stay. And one guy said, why would anyone want to stay in this place for another year if you could go back? And I said, well, I have to tell you the truth. I've never been, I don't think I can, maybe it's different for him than me, but I'm afraid to go back. And he said, why? And I said, as soon as I get off that plane, my wife and kids are going to look at me and know that I'm not the same. I thought they're just going to know. I don't know how they'll know, but I said they're just going to know. And I've been telling them when I write home or anything like that, I'm telling them, everything is A-okay. I told my wife I was working in an X-ray department, and I said the only sand I see is when I look out the window. And I didn't want them to worry. And then I thought, she's just going to know that wasn't true. And I think people have to confront their own, especially as we got closer to coming back home, you almost confront your own worth, I think. It's hard to even explain it, but I began to think, I think I've always been a little bit like this. But I thought, I wonder what I'm worth. I wonder how I'm going to have a hard time transitioning back. And what am I worth to people before they just have to go on with their lives and just say, well, he's just going to have to get through it. So there was this, we just crossed this line somewhere along the way where you sort of have to ask yourself that question. What kind of value, do I have? And I was afraid that after a year of being deployed, that I would come back home, and at what point is it their turn? My family that's been there for a year without me, and the car breaks down, and everything breaks down. As soon as I leave, everything breaks down. It's like a joke among military families. But I thought, I'm going to come back, and it still isn't their turn. It still is going to be about something else. It's just always going to be about something else. And I began to realize that the whole idea that I'm going to get both of my feet planted in the United States and it's over, I thought that's not how it's going to happen. I had, before I left, there were three things, and it's sort of strange how these three things would have been a recurring theme throughout my deployment, but I had a friend in Chicago. Well, I knew of him. He was older than me, and he lived in the neighborhood, and he'd been in and out of jail throughout his life. And he would get out of jail, he'd go back to the same environment, the same group of friends, get in trouble, off he went to jail. But each time he got out of jail, he was more out of place. He would wear the same clothes that he got when he went in jail, and then styles change, and people move on, and the neighborhood's different, and everything. Each time he came back, he was more and more detached from the only thing he knew. And at different times in my life and through the deployment, when I thought about it, I thought about him a lot. Because I thought, I wonder if that happens to me, if I come back and everything is continued to go, and I haven't. There were a lot of times in the deployment, this was another thing, that a lot of guys who stayed on the base were asking me, who are the prisoners here? The people outside the base, they move about freely. It's their country. They just drop mortars on us as they please, and we're just sitting ducks. We don't even shoot back. We can't even. And they're like, who are the prisoners? We're the prisoners. And sometimes I would think back to this guy in Chicago. His name was Iggy. His life ended in suicide. And I think there had to be a point where all of a sudden he thought, I don't fit anywhere anymore. And no one relates to me. No one knows me. And I can't, he didn't know how to break the cycle. Then my third experience is I went in 2005. A group of corpsmen left the clinic, and they went to a Marine unit in the Battle of Fallujah, which was a horrible battle in Iraq. They besieged the whole city. It just went on for months, and eventually they moved into the city, and it's street-to-street fighting and heavy losses and just destruction everywhere. And this group of guys came back. There were about 8 of them from our clinic that went. And they came back. As soon as they came back, somehow or another, the city was lost. They had to go back. A bunch of the guys went back. When they came back the second time, they weren't the same, a lot of them. A couple of them got into trouble for drinking. It was like the cracks were all there. Well, in the middle of all this, while these guys are fighting these battles, I'd been going to school. I'd been doing all the things the Navy had told me to do. To have, you want to get good evaluations, you want to advance. And so I was doing community service. I was going to school, and I was involved in the command activities. I was made the Sailor of the Year. And the town of Waterford decided to have like a little presentation for me, and they invite the newspapers and things like this. And so I went to this, and before I went to each of the members that had been in Fallujah, because I'd never been through anything like what they'd been through. And it was almost like the Gulf War veterans I met when I first came in the Navy, that I just looked at them and I thought, wow, these guys know what's going on out there. And so I asked each of these guys, I went around individually and I said, look, they're having a ceremony for me, but I want you guys to know that I would just like you guys to be there if you could be there. Would you go and be there? And I just would like to say a couple things about what you guys did while I was here. And each of the guys said, yeah, sure, I'll go. They seemed a little uncomfortable, but they're, okay, I'll go. Well, the day of the ceremony comes. It's 15 minutes before, and there was no one there. None of them showed up. They had command representatives, but none of these combat veterans had been there. And it's 10 minutes before, and I'm looking around, I'm thinking, what the, wow, this is taking, well, the time comes for the ceremony to start, none of them are there. So we went through the whole thing, and what I said when I was talking to everybody, and they had the people there, and I said, in this last year, my intention was to have these guys here because I'm being recognized, at least in part, for my community service, but there's no greater community service than what these guys did. I thought, I went home and I slept with my family, I played with my kids, I went to school, got into my car, drove wherever I wanted to go, and I couldn't have done it without these guys doing what they're doing. I thought, I got the easy part. They're recognizing me. I've got this is as easy as it gets. I'm just doing something I like doing. Well, the next day I went into the clinic, and I saw one of the guys, and I said, hey, come on over. And I said, look, I thought you guys were going to show up at that ceremony. And he sort of gave me a look, and I realized it was the same look he gave me when he said yes. And he said, I appreciate you asking. And he said, I can't speak for the other guys. But he said, I didn't go because I don't want someone to call me a hero. And it's like a recurring theme from people I know. It's something I would say now. He said, I don't want anyone to call me a hero. I don't want to be paraded in front of people and people are waving flags. He said, I just want my life back. That's all I want. I want someone to look at me like they looked at me before I left. I just did what I was told. I just did my best. That's all I did. So those things I thought about a lot in my deployment. And those are things that I think in that moment when we were on that convoy, all those things just seemed to pop in my brain like at the same time. It was almost like it was the same thought. The things I was deathly afraid of. And the things I was afraid of, everything that you go through, I just thought of those guys. And then I began to worry that transition wouldn't be smooth. And then that sort of brought me right back to that same point when it came time to come back. That's what I was afraid.
While you were over there, how did you handle the day-to-day stress?
I think I deferred a lot of things, and there were a couple other things in my life that occurred to me, and I tried to use things to sort of bring me to get me through. I learned in the time I was a marathoner, and I had a number of different strategies. I think when I saw these guys come back from Fallujah, I had this brilliant thought in my own brain that I thought, well, I think I can figure out how I can go and come back and not have to struggle like they do. And one of the things was I didn't want to have a blanket hatred for anyone there. And I thought, I'm going to actively try to learn something about the culture in Iraq where I can respect them. And I thought, I don't want to go there I know the whole training is about being efficient, and there's things you have to do, or else it could be to the detriment of the people around you, and that can't be done. And that's another time I think that people get split. But I didn't want to descend into hating everybody there. So I thought, I'm going to make a conscious effort to not hate everybody. I'll do whatever I have to do when I'm confronted with an enemy. But at the same time, I don't want to lose a human respect for people. I thought too about my grandmother. My grandparents came here in the 1920s from Germany. And my grandmother she passed away when I was 17 years old, and I wish that I'd had a chance to talk more with her about this, but she came here between two world wars. And some people from Germany were not, it was a difficult time, I think, for people to come to the United States from Germany. And she obviously had a German accent, and she was told at one point not to speak German in public. But that was never anything that we knew anything about. Like growing up, it was, she was, I thought, like an ideal citizen. And I thought this may not have been what she thought she was going to get when she was coming to the United States. And I can't even imagine what that decision is like for a 27-year-old woman to come here without her husband and then her husband follow. I don't even know what that kind of a transition is like or what led to that. But I thought, but she was never anything, but she loved this country. And I thought, and the country didn't provide They didn't get rich. They didn't, like all the things maybe that people might hear when they're overseas. But I'm thinking it didn't provide any of those things for her. But she had peace, and she had faith, and she had all these good qualities, and none of that was changed. She was a great citizen. Heroic, even. And I try not to use the word heroic. I think my parents were similar to that. I think a lot of these were things I thought about when I was trying to cope with things. My dad worked 2 jobs pretty much throughout his life. And the last person he would buy anything for was himself, because his job was to provide for everybody else. And there's so many things I think that get passed down to people from previous generations that they're never talked about. It wasn't like my dad said, I want you to be unselfish. But that the example that people have, or my grandmother wouldn't say, you need to be a good citizen and appreciate everything this country has to offer. She never said those things. But somehow or another, those were things that I thought about while I was there. And I thought to myself, my responsibility is to the people around me. And I think that was where I thought, I'm just going to defer everything till I get home. Because I thought, if I'm not, the time I'm not there might be the one time that someone who needs me would come in and there's no one there. And I just felt there was an obligation to people around me. So my way of dealing with things was I'll just wait till I get back and I'll deal with it then.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
I carried a picture of, we deployed with a unit. And their son was missing. He hadn't been discovered at that point. And the family, they were from Ohio. And I don't know how I can forget his name, but he'd been missing. There was his convoy was attacked. He was in the Army. His convoy was attacked, and 2 of the people were killed immediately. And somehow or another, he wasn't discovered. And his family, in that time, a lot of the guys, they were from a reserve unit in that area of Ohio. They were like, oh, you should meet these people. They haven't given up for a second. They're waiting for their son to come home. They still, while we were there, and this was in 2004, they still were distributing pictures. And it had a picture of him, and he was sitting in his convoy, and he had a nice smile, a good-looking young man, there, and it said, "Remember my face if you see me." So I kept that picture with me. I didn't know him. I didn't know him, but I felt in some points like I did. And I thought if they assembled a team on that base, they could say, we need 100 guys to go out and look for him. They would have been, the first 100 guys they would have seen would have just said, we're going to go. And they were proud at times when something would happen to a member and they wouldn't leave him. And you would just think that would be me. They're not going to, if something would have happened to me on those convoy teams, they would have looked. At times they're threatened. They're like, you're going to walk through the gates of hell if you keep, coming to this area looking for this guy. And they would just keep looking. And to me, I thought that would be me looking for that man, and that would be the guys around me looking for me if it were me. That meant a lot to me.
Did you do anything for entertainment on the base when you had downtime?
They had tournaments for a while.
Tournaments.
They had like flag football tournaments. At one point, they had like a little bit of, they had what they call a smokers tournament, a boxing tournament. And anyone who would want to participate in it could. But they had some guys, they had, part of it was during football season, so they had fantasy football leagues, and they had, people would just try to meet, I think, when they could. There really wasn't anywhere to go. It wasn't a very big place. But they'd have one area where they'd have the shops that we called beautiful downtown Kambuka. And it would just have a couple shops, and then they'd have like a restaurants, and you could just go there and just hang with people. They had a really dusty basketball court. But they would try to do things. There was a gym on the base, and a lot of the guys would go meet at the gym, and people just made the most of the conditions.
Did you see any USO shows while you were overseas?
There was a couple people. At one point, the New Orleans Saints cheerleaders visited, and I really felt sorry for them because they flew into this place, and they were really good sports about it. But they came in and they were walking around and they were talking to people like as a group and shaking people's hands and signing autographs. And then they did like a little bit of a show, and then they had a comedy routine and things like that. And it was really really heartening for people. But if they had from the area, the guest area that they had set up, they had to walk probably half a mile to get to these showers. And you'd see these poor girls like walking, like across this whole. They're just going, are you kidding me? Do people live like this?
Did you have any leave or R&R while you were overseas?
We had, the policy then was if you were going to be there for a year, you would have 2 weeks where you'd have an option to go home, or you could somewhere to get a break. And I think that was the case with the Army units that were there for 12, 15, 18 months. Our group, we were there for just less than a year. I think it was 360 days. So we were just short of the 1 year. So they gave us an option to go for 4 days to, I always said Qatar, but I hear people saying Qatar. But it was there was an area there, and it's you could helicopter out. Some guys didn't think it was safe enough to helicopter out, so they're like, I'm just staying here. I'm just going to sleep, go to my tent and sleep for 4 days. But it would be like a 4-day liberty.
4 days.
I went to Qatar, or Qatar.
What was that like?
It was the first weekend of the football season. So we all went. You could wear civilian clothes, and they had a limit on the amount of alcohol people could drink, which probably was a really good idea. And when we went there, they had tournaments for anything you could think of. They had table tennis tournaments. They had basketball tournaments. They just had something going constantly. And then they had like there was a center there where they had a DJ, and you could go there and dance. And it seemed like they made every attempt to just keep you as busy.
Was it all American run?
Yeah. Yeah, and they had, and then they had TVs and things like that. So some of us came, and the schedules are way off as far as watching it. So we got up. I think we had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch football games or something like that. But we had fun while we were there. It was nice to have the 4 days, and we slept in air conditioning the whole time.
What did you think of the officers and your fellow corpsmen?
We had one time, and I think I could sum the whole deployment, my feelings towards the medics and the corpsmen in one instance. There was a rocket attack. They had two instances. In one, the detainees were trying to tunnel their way out of their compound. And the tunnel wasn't discovered because they weren't trying to get out off of the base. They were tunneling where they could go in to the hospital. And they have...
Why did they want to get into the hospital?
Their plan was to get into the hospital because no one there is armed, and they have an armory. And it was just by luck. They just happened to have a truck that pulled over this tunnel. And the vibration of the motor eventually, the weight and the vibration of the motor eventually collapsed the tunnel. And so but they were actually trying to come in. And when I talked with the interpreter about it, I just said, well, I mean, this tunnel was like, it was, I don't think you can engineer anything that was, I mean, the sides were smooth, that they were like glass. And when I went and looked at it, I asked him, and he just said, well, this is obviously the work of Mukanis. I said, what's a Mukani? And they have the irrigation systems they have even throughout some parts of the desert where they can irrigate crops even in these really harsh climates. But they have a group of people called Mukanis. And what they do is they find these water sources and things like that, and they're able to do all this. And they build underground tunnel systems where they can get this water. It's like on a real slight downhill. It's not too sharp or it's scientific. And they're not educated. They're just people who this has been passed down for generations. And he said this obviously is the work of these people because this tunnel would probably be here, and who knows how long it would be. And I just said, well, why would they be building it to go into the hospital? That was my question too. And he said, well, there's an armory here, and no one here has weapons. And he said, and it's a hospital filled with detainees. And he said, looking at it now, if they happen to get the right group of detainees in this building at the same time, the medical personnel would just be overwhelmed. I mean, they would be outnumbered by 10 to 1. And they could get a hold of this armory. And I'm just going, but I don't see where that, and he said the objective isn't for them to live. The objective for them was to hurt us. And I said, well, I thought they liked they seem to like the medical personnel more than anyone else. We don't even carry weapons. And he said, that's why they would kill you first. And I was going, okay, that's not quite what I expected. But we had, that was one instance that where you can see like the shift in the way people think. To them, it made perfect sense. We had an instance where there was a rocket mortar and a rocket attack that hit one of the compounds. And this compound was just devastated with this rocket and mortar fire. And as fate would have it, that morning was the only morning it probably rained from March until November. It was the only morning it rained. And maybe they did it that way on purpose. It rained, and that morning there just was steam coming up from the ground. Because already we were leaving breakfast, and already by then it was 100 and something degrees. And there just was steam coming up from the ground, and then rockets and mortars land from everywhere. And we knew it was a compound. We thought maybe it hit the hospital. I was with another corpsman. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and we went to go for cover. And all of a sudden, he's like, we can't go for cover. And I said, you're right, let's go. And we didn't even know where we were going, but it was like a reaction. And there was a personnel carrier that was going towards the hospital, and we just dove in the back and we went. Well, when we got there, we found out that it was one of these detainee compounds that had been hit. And it was almost on the verge of a riot from these other compounds that were looking and realizing that what had happened. And when we got there, they had, these detainees were just walking all over the place. Some of them were just aimlessly walking around. They were looking like for help. And I was, when we got there, we got off and then we rushed in and we were trying to make assessments and what they call triaging personnel, like taking the people who can be helped the easiest and the quickest and separating them from people who aren't hurt very bad or who are gravely ill that aren't going to survive. And we went through the whole, the Army medics and all of us all responded. And somehow or another, I was separated from everyone else. And I went back, I walked past, there were a number of dead people. And we walked past and I saw a man ahead of me he looked like he was trying to pick somebody up. And it was so hot that he collapsed. And he was screaming at at the same time at this young boy is what it turned out to be. And I tried to run, but I really couldn't. And as I approached him, I saw that he was like sort of a heavy, sort of a portly man, and he was balding. And he had his back to me. And he looked over and he saw me, and he started he was like screaming, and I didn't know what he was saying. And I took a look at the boy, and there was no helping him. And as I got there, the boy's eyes, like that, they sort of looked at me, and then they just lost focus. And I thought, I don't know how many billion people in this world, and I probably was the last on his list of the last person he'd want to see before he passes. And I don't know why, I stopped for a second, and I thought there's no amount of tourniquets that would have saved him. And the man just grieved like I've never heard grieving like that in my life. He just sort of collapsed on top of him. And I just looked at him for a second because all I could see were this boy's eyes. And I just said out loud, I just said, I'm sorry. And the man in the meantime was going, and I'm not sure like why, but he was like sort of like getting back up to his feet, and he was crying, and I just reached down for a second, and I just touched his shoulder. And I thought for one split second, we were both just fathers. We were just fathers. Maybe a minute later we're enemies, I don't know. But for that 1 second, I thought he's a father like I'm a father, that my sons are his age, the boy. And then I just thought to myself, I have to move on. There's other people who need help. There were well over 100 hurt, 12 killed that I remember. I'm not certain even of the number, but in the meantime, there were helicopters. There was such an effort, and they had medical personnel who were just falling out from the heat, and they wound up with IVs too. But what these guys did to try to save them, and I thought they're detainees. I mean, some of these are dangerous people. I just. The next day we got two speeches, and the one was by the colonel, and he came out and he said, "You guys have no idea if you talk about winning the hearts and minds of people," because he said everyone in this base, all these guys who think only negative things about us, and he said no matter what their religion teaches them, no matter what, they all saw, like in horrible conditions, that you left none of them, that anything that could have been done to save any of them, that we did it. And he said, you may have done more to reverse this hatred than anyone else. I felt really proud of that. Then the next speech it was a one-on-one speech, and the senior enlisted guy came up and he said, "Doc, I want you to give me the names of people because I want to put them in for an award for what you guys did." And he said, so give me a couple names. Who did a great job? I said, I can't give you a name. I wasn't working with everybody, but I said, these guys are just, they were amazing. I mean, they were not afraid of anything. They just, I said, I don't know how many lives they saved, but they should really be proud of what they did. That's why we do this. That's why we're medical people for a reason. And he said, you've got to do better than this. I need, a name, 2 names, 5 names. Give me something to work with. I said, I can't. He said, you damn medical personnel. He said, I'm asking you all the same thing and no one's going to give me any names. Fine, and I'm going to put you all in then. And he wound up putting something in for everybody. But I said, I really can't distinguish. I think I wound up naming all 12. I said, I know that she was in the emergency room, and this guy was with me, and this guy was doing this and this. I just explained the whole thing to him, and all he's going, okay, you're not work with me on this, Doc. And I said, I just can't give you. I just can't. They're all amazing. I'm proud of them.
Do you stay in touch with any of your friends from Iraq?
I've kept in touch with about 3 or 4, And my plan was to keep in touch with more. But I've kept in touch with a few of them every once in a while. We talk. We have a couple chuckles.
When it was, your tour over there was winding down and you were due to come home, what were your last few days like in Iraq?
We had some downtime. They had a group, and it was another 400 Navy personnel that followed us. And the last couple of days, we had a turnover. It's like, we helped them with the training. We helped them set up records, and we had like, these are lessons that we learned while we were here. If you do this, it could make things better. And so we answered a lot of questions, and we sort of, at that point, we were out of their way already. We'd already turned over the headquarters to them. So we basically were like, we were taking way too long in the DFAC to eat, and we just were sort of, people were happy. And there was one guy in particular, I don't know why, I saw him the first day of every month. It'd be March 1st. He'd walk by, how's it going, Doc? Hey, Robert. Goes, March 1st. X number of days to go. That's it. He had like the count. And then, April 1st. Hey, Doc, how's it going, Robert? April 1st. You know what that means. And he was counting the days. And there just were so many guys that they're like, I talked to my wife today, and she can't wait till I get, till I got home. She's, we're gonna go on a cruise, or we're gonna do, I talked to my son today. I talked to, everybody was just were excited about it, just about the prospects of going home. And I think there was a sense for a lot of people that we'd done everything we were supposed to do, and I thought we did a good job. I felt good that I thought that we had done a good job and an honorable job. And Camp Phuket had some scandals like way back previously, and I thought we did nothing like that. I thought we were really a good unit. Our hearts were in the right place.
When you left Iraq, where did you fly into in the United States? Did you come directly home?
We stopped in Germany for a couple hours, and they helicoptered us to Kuwait, and then we had like a period of time there again. And in that time, they had what they called the post deployment assessments, and it was I think it was relatively new, but they would get a bunch of people in a classroom, and they would say, okay, have you guys had, do you feel symptoms? Do you feel, and like a lot of the questions, do you think you could hurt yourself or anyone else? Do you think you're going to struggle? But the rumor passed among a bunch of us. One guy said, well, they're asking these questions, and if I say yes to anything, I'm staying here. And I forget that. I'm out. I'm going home. So everybody's just like, nope. Everything's great. Just get me on that plane and get me out of here. And now since then, I think they've adjusted that post-assessment, but a lot of people are just going, oh, that's the last thing I want is to stay, a week or any more than I have to. Now when you get back here, then they do all the assessments and things. And I think the post-deployment assessments are getting better all the time. But we had a period of time in Kuwait where we were, I think we were there for about 5 days. And in that time, they had like the movie theaters. It was much more relaxed, and we still were in uniform, but it's just, you're just sort of like winding down at that point. We weren't in Iraq anymore, so guys just were a lot more relaxed. They were just sort of adjusting. From there, we flew to Germany, and it was like a 3 or 4 hour stopover, and then we just got in the plane and flew to Atlanta.
And then did you return to Groton?
Yeah. In Atlanta, the way they explained it to us for these individual augmentees, because all 400 of us pretty much belonged to different commands. So we were put together for one purpose, and basically as soon as you get there, they're like, we're scattering to the wind. And I had mixed emotions, because a lot of them I thought I'll never see a lot of these guys again. A lot of them were reservists. And I thought they'll go back to their jobs, they'll go back to their families and things. And I miss a lot of them. There were a lot of really, really, really neat people. But then from there I got into a plane, and I think we had a stop over in Philadelphia, and then we flew right into Providence.
What did you do in the weeks that after you immediately got home? Did you go right back to duty at Broughton, or did you get any downtime?
When I got to the airport, even though the security was high, they let my wife and boys come right to the gate, and I missed a long time. Each of the boys had grown about 4 inches. Their voices sounded different, and I almost walked right by them. So but they let them come right to the gate, so I wasn't expecting that. And I'd made Cindy promise not to. I said, I don't want anyone at the gate. I just want to see you guys. I want to get into a car and I want to go home. That's all I want. Because she wanted to have like a group. And I said, please promise me you won't do this. I just want to get into it, and that's it. And she said, okay. So she met me, and we hugged and everything, and we're talking. And as we started walking towards her, she said, I had nothing to do with this, but the command has a group of people and they greet everyone at the airport when they come in, and your chain of command is there, and then they just send a bunch of people. And a lot of the young people who haven't been in the Navy for a while, it's cool for them to go and see people coming back from deployments. So as we were going down the elevator, there were a whole pile of medical personnel from the clinic. But she was like, I had nothing to do with this. I swear they did this all on their own. I had nothing to do with it. But then I talked with them for a while, and they give you 4 days. They said you have 4 days, and think about it. That like the senior person basically says, hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. How's everything going? How was the flight? If you need anything, let me know. But take 4 days, come back, Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever the day is, and if you want to check out and leave at that point, take as much time as you need. Just whatever you need, we're here to help. So he gave me the 4 days off, and I was apprehensive enough about coming back that I opted to go right back to work. Which I think now that it was like the worst decision I could have made, but I went right back to work. And I thought I thought that I would take the time off later. I thought, well, it's January. I'll take the time off when we can go kayaking, or we can go, do something as a family. That was my rationale, but I think I should have taken the time and just spent some time reacquainting myself.
Well, when you were in Iraq, you said you just kept deferring everything and all the stress and saying you're going to wait till you get back to the United States. So when you came home and you didn't even take the time off then, you went immediately back to work. How was that adjustment for you after having been deferring all this stuff and then getting back?
Yeah, I think I was deferring longer. And I wanted to, even when I got back, yeah, and I think I probably would still be deferring, I think, if I had the option. And I sort of thought, I'll come back, I'll pour myself into my work. This is what I've done before. And I wanted to have the sense that I was the same person that left, that nothing was different. I'll come right back in, I'll do my work. Oh, good, I can start school again. I can, we'll do our family stuff again. And a couple nights after I got back, and Cindy was real careful about, we were just sort of, so how did everything go? Oh, great, everything was good. Boy, is it good to be home. And I think she did sense that I was like I was afraid. She sensed that something was there, and she's not one to let things just sit. And she asked a couple times, so everything was A-okay? Just everything went smoothly? Yeah. How did everything go with you? And then she's like, well, the washing machine broke down, and this happened, and I had to bring the boys in for for this, and they got sick and things like that. But I knew that she kept them really busy that entire year. They were running all over the place. And after a couple nights, we were laying in bed, and she was like, "I'm glad you're back." And I'm like, "It's really good to be back." I think my plan was to never talk about it again. I said, "It's just good to be back." And she said, I just have to ask, did you see any combat? I've been reading about, these IEDs and these things like that." And I said, "Well, yeah, I was, I was in a convoy team, and I said, and we went on in some of these, and we had one that was, I guess it was a close call. You can't really see anything." So I said, I don't know. How close was it? I don't know. I said, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And so we stopped, and we're both looking up at the ceiling, and then she's just like, "Did you see anybody die?" I said, "Yeah, a couple people." And then I was about ready to say, "Yeah, everything is okay again." I said, "Yeah, a couple people." And for some reason or other, I thought there was one instance where they had a family that had come all the way from Baghdad. And just as she was asking that questions, I thought about it. And a family had driven all the way down. There were two young women, and two pretty young women, and a little boy and a little girl, about 6 and 4 years old. They were young. They reminded me of my niece and my nephew. And the little girl, and I was thinking to myself, like little girls where they like being the center of attention. She had this pretty dress, and she had a bunch of sticks in her hand that were they were colored, like different colors, like popsicle sticks. And while the parents were there, and then they processed them in, and then the detainees can come to this area, see their family for a while. They're allowed to visit them, and then they have to go again. So it's a long way for them to travel. One of the women was not feeling well while she was there, so they had the interpreter there, and then there's certain ways to treat the woman that you have to maintain this level of respect. And so she was not feeling well, and she was distressed, and they were hot because the air conditioning in her car didn't work. And in the meantime, this little girl and this little boy were it was like they just got out of a day's worth of air conditioning. They were, zipping all over the place. And the little girl laid down all these popsicle sticks. And it was like a rainbow. And here's all these soldiers, and they were with all this gear on and everything else. They're going, "Oh," we're applauding for her, and then you could tell the girl looked. And it's just, all the attention was on her, and she thought, "Oh, this is great." So she grabs the sticks, and then she redoes them again, in a different arrangement. And everyone's, "Oh," everybody's all clear, all clapping, and just, and she was just loving it. In the meantime, the boy had this little soccer ball, and I thought, what a couple of adorable kids. And so they went, and in the meantime, they brought this detainee, and he had his detainee outfit on, and then they went, they go into a room with an interpreter, where they can go in, and then they have someone that observes them the whole time, and then they go. But when they came out, when he saw these women, they all hugged, and I thought to myself, they're not really that much different than us. They're so different than us, but they're not different than us. It's another complete. I'm they're really like anyone else. I guess when you get in that human level. And so then they left. Well, they came out, and they left, and a couple of us walked out as the car was driving by. It was, I think it was a white Toyota, because it seems like every car there is a white Toyota. And they drove by, and as they drove by, I looked at both of the children in the back of the car, and I waved. And then they sort of waved, and then they looked, and we saw the car go down. And as the car passed, it had been quite a while after it left, but there was a bomb went off. And no one really thought anything about it. They have the sirens and everybody goes and you do what you have to do. And then I found out that that car was hit. So when she asked me, did you see anyone get killed? I thought, well, I wasn't there. But I just thought of these two young women and these kids. And I just kept thinking to myself, why in God's name, why would anyone want to hurt them? And I thought of that little boy, that young boy. But I just thought about people, and I'm just sitting there thinking, it just doesn't add up. So when she asked, did you see anybody get killed? I began to cry, and I just said, it's horrible. And I said, there's a reason that people, like Dwight D. Eisenhower and Chesty Puller, these people who've performed admirably in combat, but you see quotes from them where they're thinking, I wish there was no such thing as war. I wish that we didn't, that some of the things they experienced that they didn't. It's like you do what you have to do. And it almost seems like that's where a lot of people who are considered heroic, it's almost like you do what you have to do, but I wish I didn't have to do it. They had a speech from Mr. Ingram, who was awarded the Medal of Honor. And he made a speech to a class of ours once. And the very first thing he said was, I think people were expecting, it's like, go America, get in there and kick a little butt. And the first thing he said was, I would give this back in a second if my three friends, and I'm not sure if it was three now or not, but if my friends made it. And he talked about the regret almost. It's almost like, and I mean, what he did was just almost superhuman. You're like, I don't even know how anyone can do that in an environment like that. I mean, so many people do things. I just can't even imagine what some of these men and women do under these conditions. And it's heroic on one side and it's regrettable to them on another, and it's the same moment they feel it.
Well, after that realization, Jim, that conversation with your wife, did you decide to go get help from the military?
I did. I think I realized, for some reason or another, that was a moment that I thought, you know what, there isn't anything. It actually felt good to talk about it. It felt good to cry about it. And somehow or another, one of the things she said stuck with me when she said, they didn't die in vain. You didn't forget. You'll never forget them. And so many times in your life, you're going to talk about that little boy and the little girl and those two young women and that boy and the list goes from there. But she said, they don't, as long as they're a part of your conversation, they didn't die for nothing. I felt like I wished I'd done more. And I think that's just a part of just being there.
Now, I know that you had said earlier during your interview that your goal was to come back and help other returning vets. And I know that you've done that, so can you tell me what you've done with work? And I know you're still down in Groton, and what you're doing down there.
Well, we have, right now, I had an opportunity. I'm a chief over on the base now, and an opportunity came up, and it had been a labor of love of the department head for behavioral health to have a TBI clinic, a traumatic brain injury clinic there. And what he wanted to do was take the behavioral health side, the traumatic brain injury side, and the substance abuse rehabilitation program, which is another wonderful program there. But he wanted to take the three of those and put those into like a comprehensive group. And they have models for this elsewhere, but we managed to be awarded the chance to do this. And we had a first group of 5 come through. And we took a curriculum from someone else, and we thought we can adapt this as we need it. It was a 4-week program in some places, and then we made it a 3-week program. And in the process of doing this, we tried to give them as much as far as resources. Veterans Affairs and so many of these agencies have, they even have phone apps now where you can access all kinds of things. But a lot of it was we give them, because in 3 weeks you won't have someone cured. But the point is to say, these are the resources you can go through. We can give them different exercises, and there were a lot of programs they could take and plug right in. And some of them were just different coping mechanisms and for memory issues, for some of the different things. And it includes resources for family members, because the support structure means a lot. And I know, like, even for me, when I came back, I had to go to the VA for an assessment. And one of the things, he went down through a series of questions that was designed to identify risk factors for recovery and for resilience. And what he determined just from asking me is just say, let's see, you're older in age. I was 50 at that time. He said, you're older in age. You have an intact marriage. You have 2 sons. You come from a background where your family is intact, and there's no abuse. And I mean, he went through all these different things, and I thought, I have every reason to be able to just get back as close to normal as anybody in the world. If anyone would have a chance, it would have to be me. I have every blessing that a person could have. But then I began to think, there's a lot of guys who don't. There were guys I deployed with who they lived in the New Orleans area, the area that was just devastated with Hurricane Katrina. And they got in the Navy because they're like, I didn't have anywhere to live. I was either homeless or I enlisted. And I said, well, what are you going to do when this deployment is over? I mean, where are you going? And he said, I don't know. You still don't have a house? No. And he said, you have no idea. Not in some areas, not much has been done. But this particular person didn't have an intact family, and they had, there's abuse, and there's alcoholism, and there's, and I'm sitting there thinking, for everything I have going for me, many of these guys don't. They don't, I have a wife. Some of them are single. They're going back to an apartment by themselves. So I'm thinking, for everything I have, I'm thinking I should thank my lucky stars for everything I have. And I feel that same sense of obligation, that something should be, something that I can do would help. So with this traumatic brain injury clinic, those were a lot of the things we were trying to share to them. And part of the reason they asked me to be a part of it, besides being involved in those departments, was to try to contribute that to people, to say, I am also a combat veteran. I think that it's something that's relatable to them. One of the things that I did tell them, though, is that there's a tendency among some people who've seen combat or they struggle with things they want to talk to other people who've been through the same experience. But one of my contributions is I told them, I said, you have to open it up, because some of the experiences you guys have been through, I don't even know if I can relate to it. 2 of them were Marines. I said, I don't even know if I can relate with that. I don't know what people went through when they were in Fallujah. So just saying a combat veteran is, there's, I don't know what Normandy was like. I'm thinking, it doesn't mean it's all the same. And I said, you guys have to take all this and open it up, because everyone will have a contribution. I said, think about an emergency room nurse or a neonatal nurse who goes through stresses. There's stresses on those jobs that maybe they can help you. They can help work with you on this. It's important. So I told them, I said, don't just look at other people in uniform to help you. You guys have to be open help from anywhere, and you'll get it. It's out there. So I was really proud of that first clinic. Now another one is starting up next Monday, where we have another group going through.
So Jim, now it's 2012. How many years do you have in the Navy?
19 years and 9 months. November is my retirement date.
So you are looking for a retirement very soon. What do you plan to do when you retire? Are you going to continue to work with veterans?
That's my plan. That's my my plan. Right now, I'm in the process of working on a resume and things like that. But in one form or another, I thought it wouldn't have to be a job. It just would be something that one way or another, like with the OEF and OIF, the statewide working group, is a tremendous resource. And there's people, community members. A lot of them are former veterans, but those are guys who are, they're really like on the cutting edge. And there's other states who are trying to emulate what they're doing. They're doing some really wonderful work.
Jim, how would you say that your military experience influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I think the military is a really good experience. I'll always be proud that I served. No matter what I would ever tell anyone, or no matter what anyone else would ever say, I've been able to do things in the military that I never thought I was capable of, that I didn't even realize myself that I could do. A lot of the things that I've done, and it's allowed me in a sense to it's given me a sense of passion too. I was a tradesman before I got in, but I wasn't passionate about doing that. It was something that I did. It paid the bills, and maybe I'd buy a house and live well, and that's wonderful. But I think I've always been a person that I always wanted to know, from the time I was a kid, I always wanted to know what was really going on in the world. Like I'd sneak out of my bedroom window because I wanted to see what was going on at 2 o'clock in the morning. Probably not the brightest idea, but I wanted to get a real sense of what was happening in the world. And I think the Navy has given me that. It's giving me something to be passionate about. And something that I can share with my children too. And whatever questions they're curious enough to ask, I answer them the best I can. Because I think they're as curious about what's really going on in this world and what the world really is about than anybody.
Well, Jim, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for this interview.
Thank you.